Elijah Manor. Elijah, how are you?
I'm doing well.
You're a big jQuery guy. I hear your name all over the place. You're a big JavaScript guy, actually.
That's pretty much all I do these days.
JavaScript. Okay. Well, you're well known for it. And what do you do for your day job?
I work at Append2. It's a small company. There's like 12 of us, but we do consulting, front-end consulting. We do jQuery training and JavaScript training, and then we do some internal projects in-house. We want to get into product, but that's kind of risky, so it takes a while to do that. But
sure. And you were telling me earlier about a framework that you and folks at your company have built.
Yeah, we built an open source library called AmplifyJS. It's MIT GPL, just like jQuery. But the reason we developed it is because we do a lot of consulting, because that's how most of our money comes in. But we kept running into the same kind of problems over and over again as we write software. And jQuery is great, and we love it, and we support it, and we do a lot of training and stuff. But it's very focused. It only solves a couple problems, and it does it really well, like DOM manipulation, AJAX, and animation. But outside of that, there's a lot of concerns that it's not really solving. And it's probably not its purpose to solve those,
right?
Because you want to keep it small. So internally, as we developed, we saw some problems that we wanted to address to help us as we make software, and we wanted to make it free to help others. And so there's three main parts of it currently. One is just a simple publish subscribe design pattern. You could really solve it this.
List three first. Let me.
Okay, yeah. One is it's pub sub.
Okay.
Second one is a store component. It's like a persistent storage.
Local storage.
Local storage wrapper. And the third one is it's kind of a smarter way to do AJAX.
Okay. All right. So before you get started, let me ask you this: did you consider just contributing to jQuery, and so those features would be in the core of jQuery? Was that ever on the table at all, as opposed to going out and writing your own?
Well, some of them are so different from jQuery's purpose that it didn't make a lot of sense for us to add it. I mean, a lot of people complain today that jQuery is too big. Okay. I think it's probably not a good fit. And even our components, we made them separate, so if you only want to use one, you could use it. You don't have to use all three. If you
okay. I think they're designed to work with jQuery, so
yeah, they're complementary to jQuery.
You would use jQuery and you would use Amplify.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Will they work without jQuery?
Store and PubSub don't have dependencies on jQuery. Their request piece uses jQuary, but if you really like Mood Tools or Prototype or Dojo or UI, you could actually swap that out and make your own type. And so, by default, we have jQuary as
okay.
dependency.
Yeah. All right. Now let's dive into some of these features. So PubSub, you started to talk about that.
Yeah. So PubSub, it's not really anything rocket science, but that concept's been around for a long time. Kind of the observable type design pattern where, like, hey, something happened, and I'm publishing a topic and maybe some data, and multiple people are maybe listening, subscribing to it. So it's not a new technique. And you could actually solve the problem using custom jQuery events. Mm-hmm. So in jQuery, you could just make up a new event type and trigger them and bind to them. But we made an API that's a little bit cleaner. Because if you actually wanted to publish and subscribe something that's not attached to the DOM element, like it's just, hey, something happened and it's not really tied to a div or anything. If you use jQuery, then a bunch of weird things are happening, like an event argument coming in, which you don't really need because and it has a target of an element, and there's a bunch of stuff that's not necessary.
I see.
If you just want a simple pub sub. So our version simplifies a little bit, and there's actually a priority that you could say. If I'm subscribing to something, it's like I want to subscribe I want to be the first person to actually get this message. Like it's a very important message, okay. Versus like maybe it's a low priority. I don't use it a lot, but occasionally it's been helpful to have that extra feature.
Well, give me an example of where you would do that.
Well, maybe if you had some kind of like if you wanted to, maybe some event happened or something was published that was really critical, and maybe you needed to stop something in your website, like just shut it down. That might be helpful to subscribe with a high priority and say, this is really important.
Like an error handling type of
yeah, or just if you need to shut something down immediately, like maybe there's an animation or like I said, I don't use it very often, but okay. It's nice to have it there.
All right, let's move on. The other one was local storage, which is becoming increasingly important.
Yeah, so HTML5 has...
For sure, but
yeah, definitely.
Also in HTML5 has local storage built in.
And it's just a new topic that older browsers don't know what local storage or session storage are. But it's actually interesting because IE, even back in old versions, had, well, cookies have been around forever, but cookies have their own problems. They're small. A lot of developers forget or don't realize that that information is being sent for every request to the server.
Right.
And so it's not just for your local use.
It has a capacity high limit there.
And so it could really mess with your throughput back and forth. So local storage is a fairly new concept, but even in old browsers, there was maybe a different name for the same idea.
Those XML data islands back in the old
Yeah. And then the user data is something IE had for a long time.
Okay.
Essentially is cookies on steroids, like a smarter cookie. And Firefox had its own version. They didn't call it local storage. But now modern browsers obviously have local storage. So Amplify Store is kind of an abstraction layer. You say, hey, I just want to store something. Make sure it gets in some persistence, whatever it is.
Oh, okay.
Make sure it works.
So it doesn't provide that persistence. It's just calls the correct API depending on which browser's exposing.
And it's a consistent API, no matter what browser supported it is. If it can't find one at all, maybe it's really really old, it will just store it in memory, but you can use the same API to pull it out. So technically, it's not persistent because if you close your browser, it's gone. But at least your code will still work.
Okay.
The other nice thing it does is, unfortunately, the spec for local storage and session storage, when you store something, it has to be a string. It can't be a rich object. So Amplify Store will handle the serialization. So you treat it, you save an object or an array, and internally we actually serialize it for you into a string and save it. And then when you want to retrieve it, we'll take the string and deserialize it into like an object, a rich object. You could do that manually, but we do it for you, just because that's typically what people want to store, rich things.
Are there any restrictions on the type of data that you can store? I mean, does it have to be serializable, or is it essentially everything in the browser serializable?
As long as JSON.parse and JSON.stringify work with it, so it's a library that most modern browsers have, and that's what it uses. I think you run into problems with if you have functions, it's more meant for data persistence, and not really functionality persistence.
Okay. All right, and the third one was what?
Third one is Amplify request.
Okay.
And I kind of mentioned it's kind of a spin on the $Ajax. $Ajax is great, and all the helper methods, they provide a lot of functionality. But for a long time, it's defining everything up front. Here's where the data is, here's what type it is, here's the caching strategy, and here's the success method I want to run in the error. Everything's there, which is kind of great at first, but then the more you do that, if later you try to refactor and say, I want to add caching everywhere, then you have to go to each place in your code base and touch everything. And anytime you touch old code to try to fix something, there's the probability that you're breaking something as well.
Okay.
So what we kind of do is we kind of separate how to get the data from actually going to get the data. So we have a define phase and then the actual just request phase.
Okay.
So there's a request define and a request. And there's a lot of value by separating that out. One is if we decide to add caching everywhere, then you just go to all your defines and define caching. And you don't have to actually change the code that retrieves the data, which is kind of nice. I typically put all my defines in one script file, just to kind of like a config file in maybe .NET or something. Other things you could do is you could the backend server, whoever's writing the backend, they might change the way data's retrieved,
add fields or objects.
Add fields or rename their names or whatever. And that could be problematic because then you have to go back in your code. If you use $Ajax, you have to go in your code and refactor things. But the nice thing by splitting this out, in the definition, we can actually have decoders. So when the data comes back, we can say, in the definition, when the data comes back, run this extra little function to massage the data to look like what I'm expecting, what the rest of my code is expecting. So again, if there's a change, I'm protecting my normal code base from changes from the server. And so I don't have to change anything in my main code just to full config.
Kind of the same idea as putting views in front of tables in SQL Server.
Yeah,
Where you
yeah,
can
exactly.
extract away
Yeah.
those changes.
And the same way going out, like if the back-end people decided, well, when I'm receiving a request, maybe they changed the name to I underscore first name,
Right.
and you're like, that's silly. Like, all my code was depending first name, and you changed it. So we could actually data map it going the other way and say, use the pretty names, but before you go out, muck it with whatever they're expecting.
Okay.
And some of the other power is, by doing these configurations, you can actually configure them again, but put mock functions instead.
Ah.
So the real version is up front, like what URL, what caching strategy, data maps, but then you can redefine the same key. Like let's say we have a get news key. So get news, URL to hacker news, etc. And then you redefine get news and say function. And then you could return static data, which is helpful for unit testing.
Sure.
And then there's another library called mock.json, and it's like a template to generate random objects based on, so I want these fields and I want random data, like a random male name or a random female name. So you can combine those together and actually prototype your UI really nicely when there's no real backend at all, which is very handy. In our world, our clients either haven't written their backend yet, or they haven't given us VPN access yet, or they're changing it so frequently it's breaking all the time.
Okay, so you just stable.
So we
can actually code against.
Exactly. So we could be very productive as long as we have the mock versions, and then when it's stable, we could just maybe comment out that script include and run only the real ones, and then it'll actually.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I think people that are even people that are passionate about unit testing and mocking frameworks in the .NET world aren't being as diligent about that in the JavaScript world.
Right. Cause yeah, just like
hard.
before I knew this library, because I've always kind of been a front end guy anyway. Before I knew about these existed, I would, my friends would do the back end and they'd get their job done, and then all the pressure was on me, like, because
you had to wait until they were.
Yeah, I had to wait until they're done, then everyone's waiting on me, and I'm like, I was a bottleneck, and I'm like, oh, pressure.
You gotta put the daiquiris aside, get
Yeah.
out of the pool, get to work.
So now, we could both be productive. As long as we understand the contract, like what data is going to be sent back and forth, then we could both be very productive, which is pretty cool.
Excellent, very cool. So this is open source, anybody can use it?
Yes.
Can anybody contribute to it?
It's on GitHub, so several people have done pull requests and we've accepted them, or you could just submit bugs or whatever. But yeah, it's completely open source, and we encourage people to.
So GitHub is a place to go to get it. Is that the best place to learn about it?
AmplifyJS.com has really good documentation about how to use it, all the different overloads, in quotes, the different methods. It's highly unit tested as well, so the quality is really good. And it actually uses a test swarm, which is a distributed testing framework. So we can open up like 10 mobile devices and 10 different browsers on VMs, and they'll all pull the code, the unit tests, run them, and then send back the results. And we can have this grid of like what failed or succeeded. It's really kind of neat. So
it's good time for another show.
So it's also on NuGet. So.
Okay. With NuGet, so I can right from Visual Studio, I can pull it down. Excellent. And you have an online presence as well.
Yes, ElijahManor.com is my website. I blog frequently about these things, and Elijah Manor on Twitter, and I'm kind of vocal there.
Elijah, thanks so much.
Thank you. jQuery #technology.append to friends.